right. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming coordinator here at the Osterville Village Library. Thank you so much for coming out today on this beautiful Saturday. And to our friends joining us on Zoom, thank you so much for being here as well. Today, I have the honor of introducing the Cape Cod Area Philatelic Group. Did I get that right? This is a program that was a long time coming. I was very excited to bring this program to you. I'd been speaking with Peter Bono, and he introduced me to Lou Giorgetti. So without further ado, I am going to bring you Lou Giorgetti, and he will introduce the program.
Thanks very much for your warm introduction. And thanks for having us at the library today. And we're really looking forward to this. We've been planning for about 6 months. So we're very pleased to be here and to offer this to people who are here and who are on Zoom and out there. And in the future, they'll have access to it as well. So that's wonderful. So our program today, we're going to have 4 different quick presentations, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes long each. And then we want to have some time at the end of the program for people to talk to our members and talk about their various interests. And hopefully we can have a fun and educational day for everybody. So these are the program. These are the presentations we'll be having as we go through the day. Everybody who has come through, I hope you have signed up at the front desk, put in your little ticket for a door prize, because we have a number of giveaways we like to give to people as a remembrance of the day. So what we'll do is between each program, we'll take about 2 or 3 minutes so the next speaker can come up and get ready. But at that time, we'll give away some prizes. So hopefully everybody gets something that's nice that they can remember the day by. So I'm going to give a talk, first of all, just basically on the history of mail, which is a pretty broad topic or title to start with, but hopefully we'll get to see what happens as we've gone from the Egyptian era through today. And let's get started. So first of all, what is mail? Like, it's almost like right now, think about this, no such thing as mail. And we're going to teach everybody what mail is. So first of all, you have to have a demand for that. And then you have to have a system set up to deliver and bring mail to people. So mail started back around 2000 BC in ancient Egypt. And this letter that's shown up on the screen is an early letter from the 19th century BC. And remember, at this time, most people were not literate. So any mail or letters or documents went back and forth are really with the hierarchy, with educated people, and with government services. So this letter, again, dates back to the 19th century BC. This cover that I'm showing, we're going to use the term a stampless cover. You'll notice we don't have stamps yet. Comes from the Roman states era around 1400 AD. And this particular cover is actually at the Spelman Museum in Weston, Mass. And it shows a letter going between merchants, because you see this, whoop, that's the wrong button. Pointer.
Go down or
The pointer. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. So you see this merchant's mark, which each merchant had their own little monogram that they would put on the letter to show that it came from them. So this is at the Spelman Museum. That's close to 600 years old. So you can see that if you ever visit the museum. Okay. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Amy. We go from the Roman states to Great Britain, and the portrait on the screen is Sir Brian Tuke, who was the first master of posts in Great Britain. And this is a sort of a precursor to what we would call today the Postmaster General. And as time evolved in Great Britain, we go from 1516, his appointment, to 1635, where public mail service is established, and eventually we go to the General Post Office in 1660, which then takes us over to the colonies. So in 1639, the first established site where mail could be dropped off was in Boston. And this was for mail that was going to be transmitted across the Atlantic over to Great Britain. In 1692, the British monarchy appointed Thomas Neal as a proto-postmaster because there was no postal system yet. So he was assigned to set up the postal system in the colonies. And eventually we get to Ben Franklin, who was the last colonial postmaster, the last British colonial postmaster and the first American postmaster general. And one of the notes you'll see is so he started signing some of his letters, "Be Free Franklin," as sort of a protest against the monarchy. We'll see one more example of that in a couple of minutes. So next thing we ask, okay, set up a postal system, who's going to pay for it? And initially, we had situations where nobody paid. And this is, again, looking at a Ben Franklin letter that he sent in 1766 from New York to Philadelphia. And again, you'll see Be Free Franklin is the way he signed the letter. And if you'll notice, it has a red mark up here saying free because the postmasters got the privilege of sending their mail for free, and we call that free franking. So it was a good thing for people who became postmasters because they were in other businesses, and particularly a printer like Ben Franklin. It was a boom to have did not have to pay for postage. As time went on, the recipient paid for the mail. So if I sent a piece of mail to somebody, if the recipient was responsible for paying for it. And this example is kind of a cool one. This is from 1832, from Augusta, Kentucky to Washington, D.C. This letter and the previous one are from the National Postal Museum. And what you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner is a script 25, which meant that 25 cents was due from the recipient to the postal service. But you can see what the problem is here. What happens if the recipient doesn't want it? Who pays for it at that point? Well, the postmaster has to eat the cost. So the other interesting thing about this particular cover is it went from Kentucky to Washington, D.C., and this was a justice on the Supreme Court, Justice McLean. So in 1840 or thereabouts, Sir Rowland Hill in Great Britain, we can call him the inventor of the postage stamp because he devised a system whereby the sender paid for the mail. So they devised a system where they would come up with a fee to pay for mail. And we're not going to get into all how that came about and what different fees were, but he's essentially the father of the postage stamp because he developed a system, and as a result, postal volume skyrocketed. And these are the first postage stamps, just to bring them up and show you. So we get the penny black, which probably a lot of people have heard about. That's the first postage stamp from 1840. And below we have the first two United States stamps, which came out in 1847. And other countries prior to that had started to have postage stamps as well. So now you've paid for a piece of mail, you've dropped it off someplace, and now it's got to go someplace. So going back to the colonial period, the first way that mail was delivered was via post riders. And at the time of the bicentennial, 50 years ago, hard to believe, the stamps that came out, one of them showed the post rider. And in the upper right-hand corner, this is a receipt for payment to a post rider, John Perry. And this happens to be the oldest piece of postal history at the National Postal Museum, dating back to 1687. Next, we have packet ships, and the packet ships were primarily for delivering mail between the colonies in England, primarily, but they also delivered mail up and down the East Coast. And this particular cover is another stampless cover. We'll use that term because we don't have stamps yet. Was from 1711, and it went on a packet ship, which was called the Bristol packet, from New York to Bristol, England. And if you'll notice, there's the first sign of the use of a postmark where this particular piece of mail was stamped from New York. So where do you drop off your mail? Well, initially you had to bring it to a post office, and I put up this particular picture only. This is the post office in Greenfield, Massachusetts, the first post office in Greenfield. And again, we'll notice that it was not a post office. It's not like the post office across the street. A lot of times the postmaster was in a store or in some other establishment and used his facility and became the postmaster for a given town. So quick question, who was the only president who was a postmaster? Charlie.
I think it was Abraham Lincoln.
It was Abraham Lincoln, yes. The one and only. Although Harry Truman, I think, was assigned, but he never took the post. So Abe Lincoln, and I just saw a move with Abe Lincoln and showed him sorting mail in his little store. But then, wait a second, what about mailboxes? Well, mailboxes actually started. The first one was in 1787. It was essentially a hollowed out tree stump. And this was really used by post riders as opposed to the general public for dropping off mail. But this is the box tree, and it's on Long Island. It's actually, I saw a picture of where it originally was, and it's on the corner of Box Tree Street. But here's a couple of examples of post office postal drop boxes. You have an elaborate one from England, and then you've got an older around the turn of the century, 1900s, in the United States. Okay, so you dropped it off. Now it's got to get from point A to point B. And initially, after post riders were used in the early times, mail coaches and then stagecoaches were used to deliver mail. And my brother Charlie gave a good talk a couple of years ago at our club regarding special delivery mail. And why I bring it up, because speed becomes of the essence as time gets on. And we're going from weeks to months to get a letter delivered, let's say from the United States over to Great Britain, or from the East Coast to the Midwest. Time starts to compress as new things are brought into play. So the stagecoach, mail coach was used to deliver mail from point to point. And then we had the Pony Express come along, and the Pony Express has a storied history, but it's to be remembered, it was only around for like 18 months, and it was a private mail service. It was not part of the postal service. But here's the key: is that they're trying to say we can get your mail from New York to San Francisco in 10 days. So speed is becoming more of an issue. Now we have the railroad come along, and the railroad would serve to be a major component of mail delivery for the better part of a century, from the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s. So the Transcontinental Railroad helped to speed up mail delivery from coast to coast, to the point where the railroads actually had mail cars. You'll see railroad post office cancellations on letters to show that the mail was actually picked up and sorted on a mail car. And you can see it came with all kinds of contraptions to pick up the mail and drop off the mail as they went through a station. Again, speed. They didn't want to stop the train. They wanted to go, boom, go through, pick up the mail, drop off the mail, and move on. And they sorted it. And so it was, by sorting it on the train, it was speeding up the processing at the final endpoint. Then we get to airmail. So in 1918, airmail service began. And again, long storied history there. It's a topic that people that's the one thing that they like to collect is airmail. I know someone in the room who does that. Example of one of the early airmail planes, it was a Curtiss JN4, also known as the Jenny. I couldn't help but put up the most famous, perhaps, United States stamp, which is the inverted Jenny, which was the first airmail stamp, even though it's C3. It's the reason for that. I know they changed the rates. And here's just a couple of photos of some of the early pioneers of airmail delivery. Eddie Gardner from 1918, of course, Charles Lindbergh, who went from his barnstorming days to delivering mail to then, flying across the Atlantic. All right, so now it's gone to its final quote unquote destination. Now we have to get it from the post office to the recipient. And again, initially the post office was the hub of activity in a lot of towns. And you can see the post office shared space with real estate agents or whatever. So it was a hub of activity. This is from Oklahoma, and it just shows that people, that's where they went to get their mail. When they saw the mail coach coming, they ran to pick up their mail. Home delivery, that started around in the mid 1860s. It was mainly confined to towns and cities that had a lot of mail to deliver and could financially support doing something like that. So again, home delivery was not common for quite some time, at least except in bigger cities. Again, here's the postman delivering it to the recipient. But then again, can the guy go from house to house and do this, hand deliver everything? No. So then they said, get a post office, get a mailbox, so the postman can come along and pop it in. And they came up with all kinds of regulations as to what the mailbox should look like and how big it should be and who can access it. So get a mailbox. Again, in the name of speed, the Postal Service developed special delivery mail in 1885. And again, the point here is that if you purchase a special delivery stamp, it didn't get it from point A to point B any faster, but it got it from the post office to the recipient faster, because the requirement was that the post office would have to get it to the recipient the same day. So you went from, this is the very first special delivery stamp. You see you have a mail carrier literally running it to the house. But then other stamps, as you go through the history of the special delivery stamps, shows the ways that they delivered mail: bicycle, motorcycle, cars, trucks. So however it was, again, that their responsibility was to get the mail there the same day. Rural free delivery was instituted in around 1896, and it was just a means of getting mail to rural areas a little bit more quickly, because people living on farms, they would have to literally go to a post office to pick up their mail, and it was considered inequitable compared to what was going on in urban areas. So they developed rural free delivery. Parcel post service, delivering packages, and people worked their way around this by doing things like delivering kids. So this is a posed photograph. It's not actually showing a postman delivering a baby, but if you look at the article that was written, this happened, and it talks about the child having a sticker on her. Cost 33 cents to deliver her from point A to point B. They closed that loophole rather quickly. So to kind of wrap things up, what other things have happened since babies were delivered by mail in the early 1900s? So, technology, new services, and what are we looking for in the future? Just to show a couple of quick things, V-mail was a service that was developed during World War II to deliver just huge volumes of mail from stateside over to soldiers on the front, and then in reverse. And the way this worked was, you went to the post office, you got one of these V-mail forms, you filled it out, you delivered it to the post office. It was brought to a facility where they microfilmed it, put the microfilm in bags, shipped it overseas, developed it, put it on a piece of paper, and delivered it to the soldier, and then worked in the other direction. You'd say, wow, that's an awful lot of work. But it greatly reduced the weight, and increased security, and reduced the delivery times, believe it or not. So it was an interesting development during wartime. The first automated post office in 1960 was in Providence, Rhode Island. And again, big volume, developing with mail. Computerization is coming in. You use the term computerization in quotation. I laugh at this picture a little bit, because you got these mail clerks in this room sorting mail. You got this bank of computers up on the wall, and probably have more computer power in your pocket right now than was in that room. So just shows how times have changed. Then we had kind of low tech, high tech. And this is where the zip code came into existence in 1963. And zip means Zone Improvement Plan, and government parlance. And it was basically to encourage people to help the postal service do their job by facilitating sorting. So you put your little 5-digit zip code on the letter, and that was going to zip it to the next location quicker. Probably didn't, but it helped the sorting process. And there was this little poster on the right-hand side just shows, there was a big like public relations, push to get people to use zip codes to make the mail move a little bit quicker. Priority mail, just as an example. So you've all seen priority mail envelopes. Just happens to be a poster, upgrade your shipment. Really doesn't. It's 2 to 3 days guaranteed. You do get tracking, and you can put it up to, I think, as much as you can stuff in an envelope, but now it costs you $10.10 to do that. This is the 2025 stamp for priority mail. Then you get express mail. Now here's where express mail, think of it going back to what we talked about, special delivery. Special delivery, it went from point A to point B, then in one same day it had to go out to the recipient. Express mail is guaranteed overnight delivery. So they came up with, the American Eagle, that's kind of the symbol of moving forward. Costed $31 now to do that, but you get guaranteed shipment the next day. Again, people need that. You can actually get mail delivered same day. Cost you a lot of money, but you can get it done. So what's in the future? It's showing us 2 stamps again. So we've come to the 21st century. What's going on? Put the stamp from 2006, Ronald Reagan stamp, and it shows that at that time the rate was 39 cents for a first class letter. And in 2006, there were 216 billion mail pieces delivered in the United States, and that's the highest volume in history, 2006. Go to 2023, the rate now is 66 cents. If I do my math, that's like about a 70% increase, roughly. And we're down to 116 billion pieces of mail. So 100 billion pieces less than just 17 years earlier. So you can imagine that the price of stamps is going up because they have to support a system that's not delivering as many pieces of mail as it used to. So why? Well, there's competition, and probably the biggest one is obviously email, where you, again, looking for speed, you boom, instantaneously can deliver a message from somebody, from yourself to somebody else. There are other private delivery services which are serving as competition. So what the future holds for mail delivery, who knows? But it's certainly changed over the years as we go back to the hieroglyphics of 2000 BC to today. Anybody have any questions? Sure.
Microfilm. Email. What happened to the microphone itself?
Good question.
Curious, wouldn't it? It survived.
I'm getting a hint from the crowd. It was, so the question was, what happened to the microfilm after they developed it? It was destroyed for security purposes, I'm guessing.
There's still some remnant, but generally destroyed.
Yeah, it was generally destroyed. So any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to do our first giveaways. So we have our little box.
Which is the next set of slides that we're going to?
Yes,
Which one?
the yellow one.
This one.
Everybody's gonna win something today. Very good.
Oh, God, no.
I didn't.
Don't have the name. Last 3 digits, 125.
125. No name. Okay, come on up. Choose whatever you like. We have 12 different gifts up here.
Just want to make sure the cursor's on the page.
125. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Whatever you like.
Oh, my.
Really? That's what the raffle was for?
Yes.
Oh.
The Liechtenstein one. Oh.
Hey, Marie, throw one on the number.
So,
Oh,
yeah. So. If you just try to stand in front of it, doesn't see you.
Okay.
And you're not gonna use it.
I'll always stand pretty much where you're standing.
116. Come on up.
And Peter said that he wanted to make sure that people were using the microphone. So if you could either like, make sure that you're near it when you're talking, maybe that would help.
Okay.
I think the back of the room wanted to hear me. Oh, yeah, I and I have the.
Cool.
Also, if you don't feel comfortable using the clicker, you don't have to, you can use the arrows, whatever you.
Okay, I'm just gonna tap this.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'll be in that room when you need me.
We could extend the mic closer to Dana because he's pretty such.
Okay. Oh, testing 1, 2, 3. Tell me when you want me to begin.
All right, Dana.
Okay, thank you for coming. This presentation will give you some idea of how the present postal system in the United States evolved from the beginnings in the colonial days, and will show you some of the more notable stamps that were issued. In colonial America, as Lewis pointed out, a postage stamp wasn't affixed to a letter because stamps hadn't been invented. Ordinarily, the sender didn't pay a fee. When the postman found the person to whom the letter was addressed, the addressee was required to pay a fee before the postman handed the letter over. As you might imagine, this was not a terribly efficient system. A similar system was put in place in the early years in the United States. The sender took his letter to the post office and paid a fee based upon the distance the letter was to travel. The clerk wrote the amount paid on the letter and stamped it with the name of the post office and the date. These envelopes are now called stampless covers. To continue the story, we must look to Great Britain, where postal services were just as bad as in America. In 1839, Rowland Hill, a postal administrator, argued that the Royal Mail should issue postage stamps and deliver a letter to anywhere in the country for a penny. He also said that there should be post boxes where letters could be conveniently deposited. Many thought his ideas were ridiculous, but in 1840, the first year after his ideas were implemented, the number of letters sent in Britain more than doubled and postal revenues increased. The first postage stamp that was issued in Great Britain in 1840 has become known as the penny black. Its design is based on a portrait of Queen Victoria when she was 16. To discourage counterfeiting, the letters in the lower corners were made on each stamp, were different on each stamp on a sheet of 200. In 1841, penny blacks were replaced by penny reds, as it was often difficult to see that a penny black had been canceled. The United States government was slow to adopt the use of postage stamps. In 1845, the postmaster in New York, perhaps envious of the British reforms,
took matters into his own hands. He printed stickers which allowed a customer to indicate that the fee was paid and to drop the letter off at the post office at any time of the day or night. After this practice was approved by Congress, other postmasters followed suit. These are now called postmasters provisionals. They can cost a collector from about $1,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. In 1847, the United States issued its first postage stamps. A portrait of Benjamin Franklin, the first Postmaster General, was chosen for the 5-cent stamp, and George Washington was chosen for the 10-cent stamp. The stamps have no perforations, those little holes between the stamps that some of us remember. Such stamps had to be separated using scissors and are called imperforate. In 1857, sheets of imperforate stamps that had been issued in 1851 were perforated, making it easier to remove an individual stamp. By the 1860s, the hobby of stamp collecting began to take off. But as there were only a dozen or so stamps that had different designs, collectors used slight differences, usually in the frame surrounding the portrait, to create different types of what was essentially the same stamp. This practice at least doubled the number of collectible stamps. The differences in these stamps are sometimes so subtle that an expert is required to distinguish one from another, and certain types can be much more valuable. The United States Postal Service seems to have adopted the Pony Express as if it were its own creation. It was, in fact, a private enterprise like the United States Parcel Service or Federal Express. For about $200 in today's money, the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company would take a letter from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. Only once did a batch of mail fail to get through. The Pony Express was only in business from April 1860 to October 1861. The company was never profitable and collapsed after telegraph wires connected the East to the West. The Southern states began to secede after the election of Lincoln in 1860. Before Confederate states issued postage stamps nearly a year later, many Southern post offices issued provisional stamps or simply stamped a letter with the name of the post office. Together, the value of a Confederate provisional usually exceeds $1,000, and if it is on its original envelope, considerably more. During the war, the Confederate government issued about a dozen stamps. In addition to depicting Washington, Jefferson, and Jackson, all of whom owned slaves, the stamps featured local heroes John C. Calhoun and Jefferson Davis. The increase in foreign mail prompted Montgomery Blair, Lincoln's Postmaster General, to propose an international conference to discuss common postal problems. Until that time, international mail had been regulated by different agreements that were binding only on the signing members. The 15 nations of the conference established guidelines for foreign mail and created the framework for the Universal Postal Union, which regulates the handling of international mail. In 1867, the post office began to grill stamps to discourage the practice of trying to reuse stamps. A grill was a grid of small indentations that allowed the ink from the cancellation to better soak into the fibers of the paper. That made it more difficult to remove the cancellation and reuse the stamp. The practice of grilling was abandoned a few years later, but not before the many varieties of grills generated a new field for stamp collecting. A grilled stamp realized the highest price at an auction in 2024, being hammered down for $4.4 million. United States stamps until the years just following the war had depicted only Benjamin Franklin and Presidents Washington, Jefferson, Jackson, and Lincoln. In 1867, the government issued stamps that showed something other than a portrait. Oddly enough, the stamps, called pictorials, were so unpopular that the post office issued only stamps with portraits for the next 25 years. 3 of the stamps show how mail was transported. Steamboats carried mail as early as 1813 and trains as early as 1834. The Postmaster General during the administration of Benjamin Harrison between 1889 and 1893 was John Wanamaker, the founder of a department store in Philadelphia. Businessman that he was, Wanamaker introduced many reforms to the Postal Service, making it more efficient. He promoted rural free delivery and the parcel post, although those innovations were not instituted until after his tenure. In 1893, America celebrated the European discovery of America at the World Columbian Exposition in Chicago. The post office made the exposition forever memorable to collectors of U.S. stamps by issuing a set of 16 stamps depicting the various aspects of Columbus's career. The Columbians were the first so-called commemorative stamps. Isabella of Spain, shown on a few of the stamps, was the first woman to appear on U.S. postage. The Columbian stamps were so popular with collectors that in 1898, the post office issued a 9-stamp series for the Trans-Mississippian Exposition in Omaha, Nebraska. The stamps depict Western themes. The $1 stamp, Western Cattle in Storm, is considered by many to be the most attractive U.S. stamp, but it is hardly the most accurate, as it is based on a painting of cattle in Scotland. Oops, I screwed something up here. Okay. Oops, still getting it. Okay. Lighter touch, baby. The stamps that are affixed to most letters are called regular issues. Until the mid-20th century, these stamps usually bore portraits of Benjamin Franklin, presidents, or members of Congress. In 1902, a series of regular issues was issued that added Martha Washington, Admiral Farragut, and Chief Justice Marshall. The detailed engraving and different ornate frames make this series particularly attractive. In 1887, the United States Post Office began delivering packages sent from abroad, but not until 1912 did it handle parcels generated from within the country. When it introduced a parcel post service, it issued this set of stamps. The 1 through 20 cent denominations depict the then current means of handling, transporting, and delivering mail, including by early airplane. In 1898, the Universal Postal Union standardized the colors of certain stamps by assigning a particular color to each denomination, a convention that lasted until about 1945. 1-cent stamps were to be green, 2-cent stamps red, and 3-cent stamps purple. As a result, between 1898 and 1932, when the basic letter rate was 2 cents, there are many red stamps, and between 1932 and 1945, when the rate was 3 cents, there are many purple stamps. In the early years of the 20th century, the post office issued several sets of stamps in connection with various expositions. Here are a few examples of these stamps issued in conjunction with expositions in Buffalo, St. Louis, Hampton Roads, Seattle, San Francisco, and New York City. In 1918, the post office announced it would issue a red and blue 24-cent airmail stamp showing a Curtiss Jenny airplane. To produce the stamp, each sheet would have to go through the press twice, once for each color. William T. Roby, a stamp collector, realized that if a sheet were placed in the printing press in the wrong way, it would result in an upside-down airplane. On the day the stamp became available to the public, Roby went to the post office and was rewarded when he was handed the only known sheet of inverted jennies. In 1920, on the 300th, between 1909 and 1920, most of the stamps that were issued were Washington Franklins. They all look pretty much the same as those that are illustrated on the slide. There are about 109 basic types showing Washington and about 51 basic types showing Franklin, and many more varieties. Collectors who specialize in Washington Franklins enjoy the subtle differences in design, perforation, colors, types of paper, and watermarks. In 1920, on the 300th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims in Provincetown and Plymouth, the post office issued this set of stamps to commemorate those events. The United States, or an abbreviation of the United States, appears on every American stamp, except for those of this series. In the late 1920s, a series of post office robberies in the Midwest led the post office to issue stamps overprinted with an abbreviation of Kansas and Nebraska. These stamps were delivered to small post offices in those states, which were the usual target of thieves. It was hoped that the stamps would discourage robbers, as the overprint would make it more difficult to fence stolen stamps, particularly outside of the overprinted state. Ironically, because the overprinted stamps are worth more than the originals, the series has encouraged forgers. A series of 3-cent stamps was issued in 1930 for the sole use of mail carried on the LZ-127 airship named the Graf Zeppelin. Airships were all the rage in the 1920s and 30s as they reduced travel time over water from weeks to days. Stamp collectors played a significant part in funding the Zeppelins, as most of the proceeds from the sale of the stamps went to the Zeppelin Company. The stamps are rare and expensive because so few were produced and because the remaining stocks were destroyed 10 weeks after they were issued. Most collectors couldn't name a Postmaster General with one exception, James A. Farley. Up until the abolition of the cabinet position in 1971, the president's political advisor would often be made Postmaster General so that he could attend cabinet meetings but have virtually no departmental responsibilities. Jim Farley, a political advisor to FDR, is remembered by collectors for producing limited editions of stamps, which he handed out to those whom he wished to influence. Fortunately, when the cat got out of the bag, the stamps, sometimes referred to as Farleys, were produced in sufficient quantities to make them available to the general public. A popular series for collectors are the Prexys, which were issued in 1938. The profile of every president from Washington to Coolidge is shown on one of the stamps, together with the date of his term of office. There are a few additional stamps with half denominations showing Franklin, Martha Washington, and the White House. The denomination of each stamp up to Grover Cleveland on the 22-cent stamp corresponds to the number of the term of the president. In 1962, the post office issued a stamp commemorating Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who had died the year before in a plane crash. A few sheets, nobody knows exactly how many, were printed with the yellow inverted. The mistake is subtle, but its most noticeable aspect is a white area to the right of the Secretariat building. When the error became known, the post office printed 40 million inverted stamps so as not to create a rarity. However, an invert appearing on an envelope canceled before the reprinting is worth thousands. In the late 1960s, postal workers went on strike over low wages, working conditions, and the right to collectively bargain. The strike directly or indirectly resulted in the creation of the United States Postal Service to make the mail service less of a political plum and to encourage a more efficient service. In 1994, the Postal Service issued a painted stamps which it called the Legends of the West. Among the personalities which the Postal Service wished to depict was Bill Pickett, an African-American rodeo performer. Unfortunately, it used a picture of Ben Pickett, Bill's brother. The error was noticed by Bill's great-grandson. To rectify the mistake, the Postal Service recalled all the panes showing Ben and issued 150,000 new panes showing Bill. These were made available to the public through a drawing. The original pane is not worth much more than its face value of $5.80. The reissued pane currently goes for about $200. The last stamp we're going to look at is a reissue in 2013 of the inverted Jenny that was first issued in 1918. Most of the stamps were issued in a format of 6 $2 stamps showing an upside-down plane on a small sheet. But 100 were intentionally issued with a right-side-up plane. They were randomly distributed to post offices across the nation and packaged so that neither the post office nor the customer knew whether or not the plane was right side up. Many collectors were appalled by this scheme as it seemed to be an intentional violation of the post office's long-standing policy of not creating rarities. A right side up pane is currently worth about $50,000. Thank you for watching. Are there any questions?
The question is,
Yes.
now, were the original stamps, did they have glue on them, or did that come later?
I think they had glue.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had glue.
Is it the black screen?
Yeah,
The black one?
you just gotta, not gonna use the jacket.
This one?
Sit the D on the keyboard.
The what on my keyboard?
In your presentation mode, if you hit the, let it be, it brings up the screen. And then to bring it back, you hit the B again.
Okay.
We're not using the next thing is just on the top.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
One 24, the last 3 digits. All right. She wants that. She wants to make it opposite. Take a look at what we have and. What is it like? Go with another one. Ted, pick a number.
Okay. 118.
118.
That's me.
All right. Line up. Get both of those. Both come together.
A lot of stuff.
There we go. Oh, yeah, there's some stamps in there, you have to fill it in.
Yeah.
Well, they do have some, I don't know where they are, but I could find them.
Good, fun. Excellent.
My up, boss?
Cliff, you're up.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My talk is a little different. I have troubles turning on my cell phone, so I didn't make up any slides. So it's more of a hands-on type presentation, and it's how to collect stamps. So how many people here are stamp collectors? So we have a few non-collectors. Does that mean you're going to start collecting stamps? All right. So my topic is, how do you collect? And it's a really big question. How do you collect? But there's really just one answer. And you collect how you want to collect. There's no rules. There's no regulations. It's how you want to collect. And if you talk to or ask any of the collectors that are here from the club, we all collect something different, and we collect things in different ways. So that's one of the great things, you know, of our hobby, is you collect how you want. And if you ask the collectors in the room, when did they start collecting stamps? A majority of them are going to say when they were a child, when they were a kid. They would get some stamps from their father, get some stamps from their uncle or their grandfather, and they were in their glory. They would start collecting stamps. Then they got into school, got into high school, got busier. That stamp collection, the little shoe box or whatever it was, went in the bottom shelf of the closet. And it sat there. And it sat there for years. Maybe they looked at it every now and then, but just on the outside, they saw the shoebox and they said, oh, there's my stamps. Well, they went to college, they started their career, they started their family. And as we all know, time goes by fast. And before you know it, their career was established well. Their children were growing up, doing their own things. And just by chance, one day they opened up that closet door and there was that shoebox. The collector started collecting again. And that's a majority of how most of us was. I remember as a kid, in East Sandwich, I'd take my allowance or whatever money I earned mowing lawns or whatever, get on my bicycle, ride to the post office. Postmaster, she would always save me what we call a block of 4 stamps. And I'd get the block of 4 or 5 cent stamps, ride my bicycle home, take that block of 4 stamps, lick it good with my tongue, because we didn't have self-adhesive stamps, and stick it on a piece of paper. And that was my stamp collecting until I finally realized how to do it. So if you are, the people that are here that are thinking about becoming collectors, you really have to give it some thought. Over the years, we see many people say they're going to become a stamp collector. And the next thing you know, they jump in with both feet and they start collecting anything and everything. And then all of a sudden they just say, why are we collecting this way? So we always try to give the advice, if you're going to start collecting, is to try to pinpoint down a little bit on what you're going to collect. And that can be simple. A country, you're going to collect the United States because that's where we live. Or maybe you're going to collect a different country of where your grandparents came from, your parents came from. But sometimes people are going to collect a topic, and that's topical collecting. And they're going to start collecting cats, dogs, butterflies, birds, trains, and they start collecting that. I started collecting Red Cross, and it is endless on the Red Cross stuff. I collect pre-cancel stamps. And how many people here from Osterville? Wow. We're in an Osterville library. Nobody's here from Osterville. Over on the table here, the middle table on the far corner, I brought in some of the pre-cancel stamps from Osterville because I thought we'd have somebody from Osterville, but that's okay. One of the things when you're starting to collect You want to collect mint stamps. Well, for us, a mint stamp means that it's never been used. And usually it has the adhesive on it. Or some of the newer ones that now are self-adhesive, they're still on the paper. So that's a way to collect. Some people want to collect used stamps. And as you saw with some of the slide presentation, you see stamps with postmarks on it. And a lot of people want to collect the used stamps on an envelope, or as us collectors call it, a cover. We don't call them envelopes, we call them covers. That postmark gives a little bit of history, where that stamp was postmarked, where it was mailed from, where it got to. So that's a way to collect. But again, the main thing is to remember, collect how you want. Getting your stamps, there's different ways. Every day when you go to the post office, most likely you're getting a stamp. That's how a lot of people used to get them, when stamps or covers were more prominent at the post office and you get more stamps. Sometimes you can ask your friends to save them, but uh-oh. Most of us stamp collectors will get from stamp dealers. Back in the day, stamp dealers were always at stamp shows. Then the internet came along, or before the internet, the dealers would send out stamps on approval. They'd send a bunch of stamps to John. John would look through them, want 8 of the stamps, send the extras back to the dealer, pay the dealer for the stamps that he got. Then the internet came along, and that changed the ways of collecting drastically for the stamp dealers. So it has changed. That's one of the things, you know, we're always talking about the internet changing. Well, that's one of the big changes that the internet did. So I'm going to go through some of the stuff here. And again, at the end of the presentations, if you want to come up, we can explain. I passed out papers to the people that I know weren't members of the club on soaking stamps. So here you get the tub. And you have to make that decision. That's a cover. But most people think it's an envelope. We call that a cover. So when you go to the post office, you get your envelope and you end up taking and tearing off that stamp in the corner, which a majority of the people do. Unfortunately, you may have created a less valuable stamp. Sometimes you're more valuable on the cover. So you have to be careful there. So you go home, you get your plastic tub, you're gonna soak a few, you're gonna soak a lot. You don't wanna soak too many. And you wanna fill it up with lukewarm water. Usually you have the stamps up facing forward or up top. I don't need to be on TV there for you.
Well, we're recording,
Oh,
so.
all right. So then you put the stamps in, and eventually the water is going to dissolve the glue that's holding them on. The stamps will float away from the paper. And then you carefully take one of your tongs and you can pull that stamp out. Once you pull that stamp out, you're going to give it a couple shakes and it's wet. So what do you do with a wet stamp? You don't put it in the oven to dry. So they have what's called a stamp drying book, which some people will use. And basically it's just pages here. One side is plastic and the other side is an absorbent piece of paper. And that's going to dry it. Or, what most of us do, what's this? Paper towels. It's an easy way. So you're going to put the stamps down on the paper towels, one on the bottom, one on the top, and then you're going to take a heavy book. And you're going to put that heavy book on there, so as the stamps dry, they don't curl. You want to have the stamps lying flat. Well, they came out now with self-adhesive stamps. Those are the ones you don't have to lick. And that can sit in the paper for a week and it's not going to separate from the paper. Well, somebody came up with the idea of different chemicals trying to take it off. But one of the easiest is pure citrus. And this is just an air deodorizer. And you're going to take this, lay that stamp face down, the self-adhesive stamp face down, and you're going to spray the paper on the back. It doesn't take long. And then you're going to take your tongs and you're going to start to separate that off. And you have to be careful. It's a little bit more delicate than just using the old-fashioned way. But you can take that adhesive, and once the stamp is away from the paper, sometimes there'll be still a little residue of that adhesive. Hit it again with the spray. And then what the wife and I do is we usually have a sharp razor, something that you can scrape that rest of the residue glue off. 90% of the time it works well. Sometimes it doesn't. So what some people will do, again, you collect the way you want. The self-adhesive stamps, you just take and you cut the paper around it and you can put it in your album that way. The tools, there's all different ones of these guys. We don't call them tweezers. We call them tongs. A tweezer that you normally use at home sometimes will have some engraved or cut grooves into it. You don't want to damage your stamps. Using your tongs. They have all different sizes, all different styles. Everybody knows what these are. Magnifying glass. That is a big part of our hobby because, as I said earlier, we usually start collecting stamps when we get older. We lose our eyesight. So you need that. They have now come up with these neat little gadgets that will connect up to your computer screens or your computer. You can put the stamp underneath on the base, and that computer gadget there, because I don't know technology words, computer stuff, will then transfer it to the screen. You can zoom in, and I guess they're putting the magnifying glasses out of business. All right, so here you have, you've taken now, you soaked the stamps off, you got them cleaned up. What am I going to do with them? There's many different ways. And again, when the meeting's over, you can come up, but stock sheets, okay? So this is a plain basic stock sheet. This really isn't displaying your stamps. This is just storing them until you get that chance to enter them into your albums, or you want to collect a dozen or so of that same country or whatever, then you can put them in. So stock sheets. And you can also, they have in booklets. So you can use the book to store those stamps in. So once you get it, these are stock pages or stock sheets. You can set it up however you want to do it. On these sheets, again, for temporary storage or more permanent ways of keeping it. And those stock sheets come in all different sizes so that you can put the covers, AKA envelopes. You can have them that way. They make them clear. Oh, yeah. I'll get that, right, into the album. So temporary is until you get what you need to get from that set or anything like that. Then you can enter them into your album if you want to do it that way, by country, by topic, or anything.
But I was concerned about the adhesion process and the adhesion process.
Yeah. So once you either the soluble glue, and once you dry the stamps, then those stamps can get put into here using your tongs,
It's open at the top.
and it's open at the top. There's a little slot there. And then you can just deposit it into that. So that you have the stock sheets, and then you get into albums. And somebody got a beautiful album there that's already got some stamps in it. Some people make up their own pages. This is just a sample. You know, this person, whoever made this up, made the little squares. If you're doing that, then we have these neat little nifty things called hinges. And they're pre-folded and they have adhesives on them. So you lick very gentle, put it on the part of the hinge on the stamp. And then the other part of it goes onto the page so that you can mount your stamps on the page. And again, many different stamp hinge companies, things like that. Some people don't want to use hinges. They say it will damage the stamp, especially if you're collecting the mint stamps that still have the glue on the back. Then what you're going to do is you're going to collect or use what we call mounts. And the mounts are just a little envelope, almost like plastic, non-acid plastic. They're going to protect the stamp. And these guys actually have glue on it. So you can lick the glue and then that mount will stick onto the paper and your stamp is in there safe and sound. And some people like using the mounts. They'll put a whole strip. And again, the mounts come in clear or black. Some people will put a whole stick on a page. And then that way they can move the stamps around. It's not a permanent thing like you do with the hinges. You get those long mounts, and we have a mount cutter. So, you know, there's something for everything. So the albums, again, I collect the Red Cross. So this is a specific album for the Red Cross stamps of the world. And these guys actually have each one of the countries listed and the stamp that they issued for that country. So it makes it a little bit easier. You find those stamps that you need. These are mounted with hinges here instead of the mounts. And you can just do it that way. So this album here, they use some mounts. These are most likely mint stamps again that don't have the glue on it. And they mount them in that. And then I do Santa Claus also, one of my topics. So this is part of my Santa Claus album.
Here is New York.
Excuse me? Okay. So these are different, set up by different countries. And that's how they are in here. And I can move them around. I get a couple more Santa Claus stamps. So this is using stock pages, but it's my permanent album for the Santa Claus stamps. So I can move them around. And then you can have albums with covers. And these are stock pages, just like the
Here
other
is New York.
in a row. And these are Christmas ones. And these covers, collectors will make up their own covers, and you were talking about making up your own covers. So these I make up, and I put the Christmas seal stamp on it. And then I mail them out to Santa Claus, Indiana. And they postmark them and send them back to me. There's also some in here from Christmas, Florida. Once you get more involved, or actually I could say this, when you're sorting, once you get done soaking your stamps and they're dry and stuff like that, kitchen table, you got a whole big pile of stamps and you have company that night coming over. Ice cube trays are a wonderful way of sorting your stamps. So if you have many of the same type of stamps, you can just drop them into ice cube trays. You can pick up the ice cube trays, your kitchen table's clear, and everybody's happy. So once you get more involved with the stamps and stamp collecting, again, collect how you want, but there are devices, the perforations, all those little edges with all the little cuts in them
Alan Conrad.
are the perforations. So we have perforation gauges. And you have many different ones of those. Reason why we think about perforations is that will determine when that stamp was made. So like Dana said and showed some of the stamps from 1909 to 1920 or whatever, perforations are different. That changes the stamp itself, the value of the stamp, and it will also tell us who manufactures the stamp sometimes. So you get more involved using that, and that's another way of collecting. Some of the stamps are tagged with phosphates. And Lou had a slide in there about the automation of the stamps. So they would tag, what they call tagging the stamps. But not all that same series, like a Christmas stamp. Some of the Christmas stamps were tagged, some were not. So you have the UV lights. And that will light up that tagging so that you know if you have that stamp or not. Getting into it a little bit more is what's called watermarks. And some collectors will do watermarks, some will not. So the watermarks is in the paper itself. So when the manufacturer manufactures the paper, or when they're starting to print the stamps, the printer will put in the watermarks. This is British colony. I think this is Jamaica that I grabbed. And it will have different watermarks on the back of the stamps. Some manufacturers or countries, you could actually flip the stamp over and you can actually see the watermark. Some of them you cannot. So then somebody came up with the idea to have a watermark solution. All right. So you put that stamp in the tray, watermark tray, upside down, so you have the plain backing. Use an eyedropper, a couple drops on there, and it's gonna bring that watermark right out. So you'll know what stamp you have. And again, that's for us collectors to get a little bit more involved. It will tell us that we have a number 100 stamp or the number 101 stamp according to our Scott's catalog. And it's, you know, if you're trying to complete your whole collection, that's how you can do it with the watermarkings. And, you know, us collectors, we have reference books that Dave has over there, plenty of reference books, but this is one that most collectors will use. It's a Scott's. This is a specialized catalog, and it's for the US stamps. And this will tell us anything and everything we need to know about those stamps. The perforations, so we know what perforation it is. The watermarks, it will tell us if it's watermarked. It will tell us different colors, because every printer will have possibly a different color. So it's endless, but those are great references. My wife is a topical collector. She collects topical stamps, dogs, cats, butterflies, whales, owls, from all over the world. Well, she uses this book quite often. It's the identifier. And in here, it will show pictures, and it also has the name of the country on the stamp. And then you look across and find out that it's Poland or like Sweden. They don't put like Sweden on it. It's a whole different wordings. So use the stamp identifier. There's only one country that doesn't have to put their name on the stamp. And as the slide shows, who was the first country that introduced the stamp? Great Britain. They don't have to put their name on it. They have a little queen's head in the corner. So if you get a stamp, sometimes people will grab the stamps and say, what country is it from? There's no name on it. We know as collectors, that's from Great Britain. As I'm winding down, I have some important things. Scotch tape, rubber bands, paper clips. They don't like stamps. If you put Scotch tape on the back of a stamp, in a couple years, it could start discoloring the stamp. You're not gonna get it off. Rubber bands, they deteriorate. They're gonna leave markings in, usually the rubber bands are used for the covers. You know, if you have a bundle of covers and you want to keep them together, you put the rubber bands on it. Or some people will use the paper clip and they'll clip 5 or 6 stamps together. Paper clips rust. Next thing you know, you have rust all over your stamps. So that's a big no-no. Sometimes if you find a stamp and you don't know what it is, you flip it over, somebody has wrote on the back the country, Israel, Egypt, whatever country it is. Unfortunately, sometimes they write it in a pen. Sometimes that ink will start to bleed through the face of the stamp. If you're gonna identify stamps, which is okay, if that's how you want to collect, have a sharp pencil and lightly write on the back the Scott's number out of the catalog, what country, what number stamp it is, but use the pencil and not the pen.
That's it.
I think that's what I covered. Any questions?
About the watermark,
Yeah,
can you ever see it when you hold it up to the light?
yes. Sometimes you can. Again, it depends on the countries and stuff. Every country has different ones. The United States stamps watermarks are UP, UPS, but most
Ah.
US stamp, and they have a double line watermark. The US is some of the harder watermarkings to
18.
discover, because when they put them on the stamps, they only put the watermark every so often. So one of your stamps might have one edge of the S, and you can't really tell. But again, if you go into your Scott's album catalog, it will tell you sometimes what watermark that one could be, and then you have to translate it and figure it out that way.
Who prints the stamps? Is it the Bureau of Engraving and Printing?
Bureau of Engraving and Printing originally started it. Now there's private contractors.
Here is this.
And that again is why sometimes we'll have
Pictures.
different color stamps and stuff, because it's a different printing of it. If you look on your newer stamps that you're getting, coil stamps, a coil stamp only has the perforations on the sides now. The top are straight cuts and they come in a roll. If you look every now and then, usually every 25th stamp, down the bottom will be numbers. And that's the printer identification of that one. So that's a PNC, plate number coil stamp. There are collectors that collect just those stamps with those plate numbers on it. So it is endless. So if there's no other questions, I did bring some stuff here with me. Some of the earlier scales that the post office would use before they started getting the computerized ones. If you were a stamp collector as a kid, I did bring this in because almost all of us went to Woolworths when they were around, and you could buy the bag of stamps for, when I was getting them, probably 89 cents or something like that. So that's the earlier one, and it's H.E. Harris. H.E. Harris was a earlier stamp dealer. Well, then they came out with the plastic orange bags, and they raised the price to $1.49. Then they had these super value bags, and they were charging $5.95 for these guys. But it's just some of the memorabilia that you can collect, and these were the earlier ways of buying stamps. This one being one of the older ones. So you went into a grocery store or the gas station or somewhere, and you needed stamps. You put your this one here, you put a dime in and you get 2 4-cent stamps out of it. And these all the different ones that, you know, I've collected over the years. And it was just the way, I don't think I can remember the last stamp machine that I've seen anywhere, you know, except going to the post office or ordering on the internet. Leather, they used to make postcards out of leather. I've got some wood ones at home I couldn't find to bring. So we're gonna be here afterwards if you have any questions. I know I went through it very quickly. You wanna check this stuff out, you can. Make sure you visit Dave over here. He's a little lonely over here. And that funny looking thing there, you gotta come up and ask him the story of that funny looking thing there. It's a coconut. Yep. The birthday issues. There's a Red Cross, first day of issue. So we can look at this, and this is Clara Barton. So she was the originator of the Red Cross in the US. This was issued in Oxford, Massachusetts, and that's where she was raised most of her life, on September 7th, 1948. That tells us, again, if you were to cut the stamp off, you wouldn't know that information. That's why we like to keep them on the cover. And then I brought in a gold star. And that was put out for World War II times. This was Washington, D.C., September 21st, 1948. And if you want, when you guys, after you checked everything out, in the other room, we have more things too. But out on the table, when you first came up the stairs, got off the elevator, there's a whole bunch of big pile of first aid covers. Feel free to grab some. Look through, see if there's anything that rings a bell to you. You can grab it.
Available on the website, they're still doing first day copies.
Yes, Postal Service still has a first day of issue. And the Postal Service does do first day of issue covers. And you can get those on their websites. Coming up next month, April 16th, is gonna be the stamps coming out for the Revolutionary War. And the first day of issue, just like I said, that was Oxford, Mass, this is Washington, D.C. First day of issue is gonna be at the North Bridge. And it's really neat going to a first day ceremony. They have the issue of the stamp, they have the engraver there, they have the postmaster from the town there. And they do a little ceremony, and then you can get, you know, some of the first day of issue memorabilia.
Which block or sheets of mini stamps have any value beyond their value of the stamp?
99.9% of the time, no. Us deep collectors, when we go to a stamp show, dealers will have boxes, tubs, crates full of sheets of stamps. And a lot of times it's at 80% face value. But the era of the 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 cent stamps, they produced so many of them, and people were collecting a lot more back then. So they would always go to the post office, get a sheet, and get a sheet, and get a sheet. But again, yeah, there are some stamps that are valuable. Because of the era, I know Dana had that with the white streak down there, there's errors. And that could bring up the sheet value immensely. But unfortunately, 99.9% of the time, face value. The nice thing that Postal Service has not done yet is they're still allowing us to use those old stamps as postage. But when you're mailing a letter and it's 73 cents now, how many 3-cent stamps can you fit on it? So you're gonna end up sending your grandchild a birthday card on a piece of paper this big, so you get enough of those stamps on it. Thanks, people. You were great.
All right.
Forget about the coconut.
Let's take your club.
Oh,
Gonna make the room bigger.
who's feeling lucky? We
Do you want
have
me to shut it down or?
one,
No, yeah,
two,
like, so
0. All right.
we're just going to. Just, so where's the,
You're the Zoom.
yeah, I mean, do you want people?
It's okay. Speak.
Did you-
Yeah, I want to share, yeah,
We
yeah.
got
This last one we'll share.
Number 119. All right, very good. Come on up. So as Cliff said, we're not running out of here when we're finished. We're going to have all the material, you remember feeling that Cliff has brought in, Dave Boyce has quite a collection of literature that he's accumulated over the years. Every month, every week. Daily, probably, daily. And some of us have brought in some of our material in the other room, but they'll tie in some of the things we're going to talk about next. So please don't run away when you're finished. Please, we're here to answer questions and talk about our collection, but it's what we want to do, so, you know. Okay.
I forgot to mention about up on the wall there, hopefully Amy doesn't get mad at me, I put a mail bag on top of one of the nice paintings here. And that mail bag, the tear weight is 7 pounds, so they know that that bag weighed 7 pounds. So then they could figure how many pounds of mail was in it. And on the bottom left corner is a metal clasp. So once they filled it up, they tightened the rope up, and that metal clasp had a spot for a handle. So they would protect it. And like Lou was saying about the postal service using railroad cars, that's RPO, Railroad Post Office. They would have bags like that, and the train would never stop. They would have an arm sticking out, and the post people on the train would have to, as fast as they could, get those bags onto the hook. And the train would just keep on going, so they didn't get it on the hook, or they didn't grab the one off the hook, they weren't getting mail that day.
We did that with airplanes too.
Yep.
They would have a hook that would deploy off the back of the plane, and then you never had to touch the ground. Just picked up the mail bag and dropped it off, whatever they were delivering.
All set, Cliff?
Go for it, Charlie, I'm sorry.
No, it was fascinating. Thank you for your presentation. Learned a lot. Thank you. So the last presentation that we're going to do today, it's a little bit about the club itself. So we'd have a number of the club members come up here and talk about what they collect and why they collect it. But we'll do it very briefly. So we'll have a few of us come up and do that. So my name's Charlie Giorgetti. I'm one of the members of the club. And so it says here, philately, what do people collect? So, you know, philately is a term that that's used to define the study of postage stamps and postal history. And we'll describe what postage stamps and postal history means from a collector's perspective in a moment. So what I'm going to do first is one of our members, Dave Powers, wasn't able to make it today. So I'm going to talk about what Dave collects. So Dave is a collector by country. He likes to collect. So Cliff talked earlier, and there was a discussion earlier about like topical collecting or by country. Well, Dave likes to collect by country, and the country he likes to collect is Liechtenstein. Now, you look at this slide here, the top 3 stamps that you see up there were issued in 1945 when Crown Prince Hans Adams was born. So it was like an announcement of the birth of the prince. Now, what's really interesting is Liechtenstein's a very small country. I'm sure people are familiar with it in Europe. And so they do make a big deal about when members of their royalty are born. And what's interesting about that being 1945, what you see in the bottom there, the picture of the gentleman there, that's Hans Adams as an adult on his 80th birthday. Now he is the leader of Liechtenstein, and his name is Franz Henry Adam II. Now, what's interesting about this particular picture of him, you see the other stamp next to him that says 80 on it. Well, the 80 represents his 80th birthday, and this is called a souvenir sheet. So when you take stamps, a couple stamps, one stamp, and put it on a larger piece of paper, if you will, and you add other material to it, images, something about the description, the history, or whatever, that's called a souvenir sheet. So people collect stamps and people collect souvenir sheets, And in this case, this is someone, Dave Powers, who collects stamps by country, Liechtenstein. So I'd like to have my brother Lou come back up here because he's a collector of Vatican.
Thanks, Charlie.
You don't need a collector, just focus.
So, as I mentioned, as Charlie mentioned, I'm big in Vatican City. I love collecting the Vatican. And in addition to collecting stamps, we've talked about collecting covers. And a cover, as Cliff mentioned, he used to equate it to an envelope. Well, the term cover actually means covering the contents of what is in that envelope, because we've seen stampless covers, which are just pieces of paper folded on top of each other. So this is an interesting cover in that was issued on August 1st, 1929, which was the first day of service for the Vatican Post Office. Because a lot of us think of the Vatican as being like, whoa, long time ago, 2,000 years. Well, actually, Vatican City, the current country, the smallest country in the world, came into existence in 1929, and its postal service started service on August 1st of 1929. So this particular cover, which is probably made for a collector, shows all of the stamps in the first series of stamps that they issued, which is called the conciliation issue. So it shows all of these stamps that were part of that particular issue. So again, these are there's 15 stamps in that series, and again, if you look closely at the date, it's day, month, year. So it's August 1st of 1929.
Thanks, Lou. So the next thing I'll talk about is a term called postal history. Now, postal history is a little bit broader than just collecting covers, because it's the study not only of a cover, let's say, but also concerns itself with rates. How much does it cost to go from point A to point B? It concerns itself with routes. How did it go from there? Did it go from, Osterville to Providence to Boston? Because that's how mail would be transported if you mail something to Boston from Osterville. It also concerns itself with postal markings. And if you look at this cover, because what I collect around postal history is Zeppelin mail. So as Dana said in his presentation, Zeppelins existed as a way to carry mail for about 30 years early in the last century. And this cover has a lot of history on it. It has some really interesting stamps. It has a cachet, which is a marking which represents something specific about this flight. This was a Zeppelin flight that went from Rome to Germany to South America. So following that route is really interesting. Why did it go that way, et cetera, et cetera. And it also has other interesting markings on it, like people would actually put on here something special of their own design. This is called a docket, and that says in Italian, extraordinary flight of the Graf Zeppelin. It's recommended that this cover be put on it. So the collection of history is very significant when you look at a cover, and a lot of these markings, a lot of the stamps, et cetera, become an interesting area of study. So that's Zeppelin mail, and that's about postal history. Now, Dana's going to come up here and talk about something of interest to him, but this is where to now move into an area called topical collecting. Topical collecting, as Cliff said when he did his discussion, is you're not focused so much on a country or on a rate or whatever. You're focused on something that you're interested in. And as Cliff said, Chris's wife collects cats and dogs and other things. And you'll see a number of our collectors are going to come up here and now talk about what's of topical interest to them. So Dan, you want to come up here and just say a moment about what you like to collect here from a topical perspective? Thank you.
Yeah, my principal collecting interests are United States, Germany, and Greece. But I also have collected books by and about Winston Churchill. He wrote about 50 books. And so anyway, so I decided to combine my interest in collecting Churchill books with my interest in stamp collecting, and got a list of the stamps that depicted Winston Churchill from the American Topical Society, which prepares these lists, if you're interested in a certain topic, of every stamp that concerns that topic. So this particular set was fun because it's from Nicaragua, and it has quotes by Winston Churchill in Spanish. And so the game was to translate these back into English and to figure out what source in my collection of books I could find the quote. So there you go.
So this next cover is of a topical nature as well. And Dave over there, Dave works at Woods Hole. And he collects a number of topical subjects. And this is specifically about the Alvin submersible. And this cover, as it says here in the description, was signed by the pilots of the Alvin cover when it made its first untethered free dive in Woods Hole in 1964. So again, a topical interest, submarines, local history. And as you can see here, it's kind of a very, it's interesting because it has another area of topical collecting interest, which is autographs. Sometimes people like to collect covers that have the autograph of some famous person on it. In this case, while these gentlemen might not be famous, they are certainly famous in making this significant achievement by taking the Alvin down untethered. So this is an interest of Dave's. Good.
Hi there, I'm Ted Woods, and I'm relatively new to collecting, well, I collected when I was 10, like the previous presentation said, and that disappeared. About a year ago, I inherited a stamp collection, and I just got fascinated by that. And I was looking at stamps with space exploration on it. Then I came across one stamp that showed making fire. And I realized that these were two opposite ends of a technology spectrum. I said, commemorative stamps show all these achievements of humankind. Can I do a history of technology from primitive era to space exploration? So that's what I've started doing. As I said, I've been at this since the fall. Spent the whole summer just trying to get some prehistoric stamps. And this is one subset of the power and uses like that. But anyway, I've got my collection in the other room if you want to talk about it or talk about anything in there. But it's fascinating. I'm just enthralled by this. It's like the kid in the candy store.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Peter Bono. I've been a bird watcher since I was 8 years old. And I started international birding when I started traveling in my early 20s. I also started stamp collecting when I was about 10 and started setting aside birds on stamps during my college and my early professional years. I quickly realized that there were far too many stamps if you try to collect them from all countries and time periods. We're talking millions. I liked the idea of trying to identify the bird species on stamps. Remember, this is before the internet, before we had the online resources and image algorithms that we have today. So anyway, over the intervening 50 plus years, I've added about 10,000 bird-related stamps and covers to my collection. And there are about 11,000 species of stamps on species of birds on stamps. Currently, birds recognized by taxonomists, but only about 40%, that is 4,500, are portrayed on a postage stamp. So we're looking at about 40% of the species of birds that are recognized you can find on some postage stamp from some country in the world. I brought a few examples with me. I'll be in the other room with my album after the talk. And if we can advance to the next one. Where do we have the pointer?
There.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So after I passed 9,000 items in my bird stamp topical collection, I started looking for something else to collect. I learned that during the first 100 years of postage stamps, that is between 1840 and 1940, only about 118,000 different stamps were issued by approximately 360 countries. compared to several million different stamps issued by the end of 2024 by all the countries of the world. And then I discovered there is one album, the so-called the Big Blue, the international junior album issued by the Scott Publishing Company, whose binder cover is dark blue and whose pages contain spaces for about 36,200 of those 118,000 stamps. So that's about 30% of the total. I thought that was manageable. I could maybe find all 36,000 of them. So I set my goal to fill as many of those spaces as I could, starting with the first prepaid postage stamp, the penny black, which we've learned about, which was issued in 1840, and it's shown in the cover on this slide. Since I started on this project, collecting classic stamps, about 10 years ago, I filled 28,400 of those spaces, which is 79% of my goal. I enjoy the satisfaction of completely filling album pages and learning about long-forgotten countries from the 19th and early 20th century. Next slide. Here's an example from the country of Memel, which existed only for a short period of time between World War I and the end of World War I and the early 20s. And as a result of some treaties, Versailles and others, it became part of Lithuania. So it disappeared as a country. So it issued stamps only for a couple of years. And I don't know exactly how many stamps there are, maybe 60 or 70. So you can conceivably collect every stamp that was ever issued by this now dead country. So it's sort of interesting, and you learn history, you learn about the events. I mean, most people aren't even aware of all of the machinations that went on after World War I to settle the borders in Europe. So anyway, those are my two things that I collect that are topical in nature.
Well, another one of my collecting interests actually started when I first joined the Cape Cod area philatelic group. I'm going to take a couple seconds here to talk to thank Cliff, because Cliff was the one who got me started in the CCAPG. Even though I live in Quincy, I still come down to the Cape for our meetings, and they somehow thought it was appropriate that I should be the president for the last couple of years. But my first meeting that I went to, a former member of the club, Ed Hayes, gave a talk about the Constitution, USS Constitution, and unveiled to me this topic of particular covers that were issued during the trip that the Constitution made from Boston to the West Coast and back from 1931 to 1934. Which was just a fascinating thought to me. It's like, the Constitution did that? Crazy. It was towed. It wasn't in sale, but it was towed. And the other interesting thing is a friend of mine was the chief rigger on the Constitution up until a few years ago. So I had the great privilege of being able to go on the Constitution and do one of its turnarounds or one of its trips. Actually, my two brothers and I all had that opportunity, thankfully, to do that. So all that being said, I've been called the Constitution groupie because of that. So it was appropriate that I started collecting these Constitution covers. And sort of my goal with it is, this was really the start of a topic that was created, which is the Universal Ship Cancellation Society, where not only for the Constitution, but other vessels have now have covers that are cached and canceled with the ship that they happen to be on. So that's a long story to get to the point that what I'm trying to do is collect covers for every date possible that it went from Boston in 1931 back to Boston in 1934. And it's a voluminous undertaking, but it's been fun to try to find as many of them as I can. But the interesting thing about this particular cover is it's from March, oh, sorry. Hit the wrong button again. But it's from March 10th, 1933, which is, oh, what's the big deal, Lou? Well, it just so happened that there was a significant earthquake in Long Beach, California, while the Constitution was in Long Beach on that date. About 150 people died, but it was just a confluence of events. You had this major earthquake while the Constitution was at Long Beach. So, and this particular cover has the date on it, which you look up here, you'll see it says U.S. Frigate Constitution, March 10th, p.m. So this was canceled probably in the early afternoon, and the actual time of the earthquake was around 6:45 in the afternoon. And you'll see that it has in what they call the killer bars, Long Beach, California, meaning that's where the ship was located on that particular date. And there's some more information on the back here. But it's been an interesting topic to kind of tackle, and that's a challenge to get as many dates as possible. But I have some of my covers with me today if you would like to take a look at them after we have a chance to finish up. Oh, Michael.
So I'm gonna kind of wrap up with what my collecting interests are. And I've, you know, a lot of my brothers, Lou and Charlie, we've been collecting stamps since we were kids. You know, our father got us started in it when we were younger. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is collecting Christmas. Now, we've heard about topical collecting, birds, cats, dogs, whatever. Collecting Christmas is another topic, but I'd say there are multiple subtopics that you could also collect if you're interested in collecting Christmas. So the first United States Christmas stamp came out in 1962. And so you can collect United States. United States generally puts out a Christmas stamp every year, sometimes more than one. They, you know, they'll put out one like this is called, now they call this type of stamp that you see here, a contemporary stamp. The other type they'll talk about is traditional, which is more of a religious theme. You can see that you can collect first day covers. Someone was asking about first day covers. So what you see here is a first day cover of this stamp. So it's got the first day marking. The first day of issue was on November 1st, 1962, and this happened to be issued in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You can also collect countries of interest, you know, whether it's a country you have your ancestries from, country you visited. I've got an example up here of a stamp from Christmas Island. And the reason I started collecting Christmas Island, it's a small island in the Indian Ocean, is they put out a stamp every year around Christmas time, Christmas Island. They put out kind of a whimsical stamp. It kind of shows Santa Claus sitting on the beach with his reindeer with a little, you know, float tube around him. Obviously, Christmas in that part of the world, it's summertime. The other thing that these stamps tend to show, these little red crabs, which are indigenous only to Christmas Island. So every year they put out a set of stamps with this type of theme. And you can see this is like a souvenir sheet because it's a larger sheet with two stamps on it. You can also collect what, you know, we mentioned Cinderellas. Cinderellas are stamp-like labels that get put on envelopes. They don't have postage value, but they often used as decorative stamps. And probably the most popular one would be, as Cliff mentioned, would be Christmas seals. So you can see some examples of some Christmas seals here from the 1930s and 1950s. So if you're interested in Christmas seals, you can collect Christmas seals. You can collect location significant covers. This particular cover here is from the 1930s. Doesn't have a Christmas stamp on it, but it was postmarked in Bethlehem, Maryland. And there are 12 states in the United States that have a city, Bethlehem. So you could follow and collect stamps from Bethlehem. There are also a number of cities in the US that have Christmas-related names. Christmas, Florida, as Cliff mentioned. There is Santa Claus, Indiana. There's North Pole, Arkansas. There's Rudolph, Wisconsin. So there are a number of cities that,
have Christmas themes in their names, and people will often collect stamps or covers with postmarks from those particular cities. You can also, can't really see it real well, but there are machine cancels. There are machine cancels that you can collect. Oops, sorry about that. It's okay, Mike. Keep going. And a machine cancel is something that's, I think, somewhat more recent, where you'll see a cancellation that has a Christmas theme to it, and typically that cancel will be put on by the postal service, that similar to whatever this Christmas stamps that they issued for a given year. So, again, if they issue a stamp with a snowman, a Santa Claus, or reindeers or something, they'll often create a cancellation for that particular year that, is close to what that particular stamp looked like. And then lastly, there are things like special day postmarks. So this particular cover here is from December 7th, 1980. There was a Worthington Stamp and Coin Club. They must have been doing a show at the time. So they issued a stamp that has a cachet, a design on the envelope that represents the theme of that particular show. It has a Christmas stamp on it, and this particular stamp represents the song Silent Night. Silent Night was a song that was created in Austria. This picture of the church where it was first performed. So if you're into Christmas, there are you can collect all of these type of things, and there's more than that. So, we've talked about tropical collecting. There's subtopics of tropical collecting. So there's a lot that you can look at. So I particularly focus more on United States stamps. I've got a few countries of interest. I maybe have a half a dozen countries that, for one reason or another, I've shown some interest in that I collect. I collect first day covers, so I focus on US first day covers that particularly have Christmas stamps, and then other things that just pop up that, well, that's really interesting. I think I'll keep a copy of that for my collection as well. So that's how you can collect Christmas, and there's a lot of different themes you can collect. And if you're interested in it, I have a few samples in the room as well that you can take a look at. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So with that, I think we're just gonna get this.
So that kind of wraps up our formal presentation today, but we want to ask you, if you're interested, to stick around. You have plenty of material to look at from Cliff's presentation. David has, again, a lot of literature that you could take a look at and see what we have. And we also, some of us have brought our collecting interest with us as well. I saw a